Hi, I'm Nicholas Seminario, founder of Dark Angel Company. This podcast is to share the untold stories of just a few of the many people battling mental illnesses in this world. If you're in need of a little inspiration to keep fighting or to feel less alone in your battle, keep listening and share to spread awareness. This is the Dark Angel Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dark Angel Podcast. I hope you guys have had another great week. It's me and Max, as usual. Today, I think we have an interesting topic, right? It's something I feel like we all live with, whether we want to admit it or not. It's something we all deal with in one way or another.
At some point, yeah.
Yeah, it's the need to self-compare, right? We, as human beings, are constantly looking at other people and comparing ourselves. Whether we think we're better than people, we think we're worse than people, we're constantly comparing. And, this is something I'm guilty of, and I imagine you are too.
Yeah.
We all are.
Yeah.
But the way, we can kind of change our outlook and we can change how we deal with these things is where this really matters. Right? Self-comparing is something where it comes deep within us, whether it's something we're insecure about, something we're not comfortable with, right? Sometimes, I know people who do it out of nervousness, right? They're like, oh, look at that guy. Not because maybe they really mean it, but because that's what makes them feel better about themselves, right? We've evolved to compare ourselves to others to decide how we're doing, right? It's what our ancestors did hundreds and hundreds of years ago, actually. But the difference now is we're not comparing to see if we're living healthy or, we're living the longest, right? That's kind of what our ancestors did. Now we're comparing whose jobs are better, whose families are better, who makes more money, whose lives are better, and vice versa, right? Whose lives are worse, who's worse than us, who's beneath us. I want to get into today, what are the downfalls of this and how do we overcome it as a society, as our generation, older generations, how do we overcome this, right? The social comparison theory suggests that people value their own personal and social worth by assessing how they compare to others, right? So upward social comparison is comparing yourself to people who are better than you, quote unquote. And downward social comparison is comparing yourself to people who are quote-unquote worse than you, right? Both are bad, obviously, but those are the two types that are, the two types in our life. So they're both bad because we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to anyone else. That's first off, right? And like I said, I'm guilty of it, and I know you said you're guilty of it. Do you have any instances where you catch yourself comparing yourself to someone else?
On the upward side of it, sure. Definitely, you see someone with a nice car or nice things and, sure you compare a little bit, you think about how nice it would be to have something like that. I've definitely done something like that before. And then downward comparison, you see someone who may be less fortunate, they're living on the street right now, something like that. And I don't think it's a malicious, oh, this person's less than me in the world. I think it's just more so you notice the difference and you notice more of the material things nowadays. And I think people value the less material. I don't know what exactly you would call it, but they value those connections and those, I guess, time a little bit less.
Another thing though, everyone's background and lives are so different. So this is definitely a fault of ours, right? Nobody has the same life. Why are we comparing as if we do, right? And there's that saying, you never judge a book by its cover, right? You really don't know what goes on behind these closed doors, and you don't know what these people are going through. Even if you think it's logical or it would work, it doesn't, right? This isn't any way you're going to be bettering yourself. It's not something that really makes you feel good deep down. Whether or not you want to admit that, it's not going to make you feel good. Maybe temporarily it'll make you feel better about yourself, but long term, most likely not, right? This is something, it's very shallow in you to do that, right? There's a lot of side effects of self-comparison also, and this is kind of where the mental health side of things ties into it. increased depression, right? So that's first off. Increased depression because you're going to be feeling, when you're around people who you're doing this upward social comparison to, you're going to feel worse about yourself because you're constantly trying to achieve something that maybe isn't possible for you, right? You see these, say in the gym, right? You're looking at this guy, oh, I wish I was like that. I can't get there, you know. You're just going to be putting yourself down, right? Because you're trying to compare yourself to something you're not at the moment. Look, if that's a goal you have, strive for that. Strive for the stars. I'm not trying to turn you down from that. That's great, right? But to compare yourself and say, oh, I can't be that good, or he didn't put in the work, whatever it is, like just making excuses for yourself, that's not good, right? You're going to cause yourself some sort of depression or some sort of anxiety that's going to, it's going to eat away at you. It's going to affect you. The other thing is poor body image, right? So this gym example again. You're going to be going to the gym and you're going to be seeing people who are quote unquote 10 times better shape than you, whatever it is, and you're constantly comparing. You're going to be like, oh, I don't look like that. People think I'm ugly. People think I'm not capable of this. I don't have this. I'm heavy. I'm skinny. I'm, non-muscular. Whatever it is, constantly comparing is going to cause that body image to deteriorate, right? You're going to look at yourself a lot less than you should be. Your overall well-being is going to decrease because you're going to be looking around and seeing what you don't have compared to what you do have. So if you're constantly focusing on those negatives are going to come true, right? Because you're going to bring that to fruition. And that's a huge problem, right? And the last thing is eating disorders, right? So if you are looking at yourself and constantly comparing, and then that can cause spiraling effects such as, oh, I don't want to eat because I'm too heavy. I want to look like this person, and I know they're much skinnier than me, so what can I do? People then tend to, develop eating disorders, which is very, very bad, and it's scary, right? So a lot of that stuff stems from comparing yourself to others, whether it's comparing yourself saying I'm better or comparing yourself and saying you're worse. Because let's, for example, say you're comparing yourself and saying you're better than someone, right? Now when you make a mistake or you mess up, now all of a sudden you're worse than them, and then it's really, really hard on you because now you're setting yourself up and you're like, I can't do this, and then it's, yet again, it's that spiral effect. Have you suffered from any of these social comparison, I guess, side effects?
Not specifically, really. I'd say any of those four. I'd say the biggest thing probably is like when I see someone with something that's very nice or very expensive, something I desire, right? I notice the lack of that in my life, and then I tend to compare every aspect of that from there. And even at the end of the day, if, quote unquote, I'm higher or whatever, you know what I mean, like better, or whatever you want to call it, right? Or I'm worse, you're going to end up feeling worse about the position you're in, no matter how you really look at it in any kind of comparison to someone else. Because what you're seeing on someone else is the image they're choosing to put out there,
Mm-hmm.
You're not seeing everything that went into that image or went into getting those things, and that process might not be something that you're interested in. You might like the result and it looks awesome, but that work doesn't actually interest you, or that process or what they went through isn't something that you personally have any interest in, And I think that's where all of those negative side effects kind of do tend to come into play. I tend to feel, I guess, less fulfilled in the stuff that I have and the things that I'm doing. And it takes time to kind of, I guess, become grateful for those things again or appreciative of where you are, So it's not an easy thing to kind of pull yourself out of once you really get down into that place,
So, with that knowledge you have, and obviously it's easier said than done, how would you go about kind of changing that? How would you go about giving yourself that different outlook?
I think being thankful has a lot to do with it. Choosing to appreciate the things that you have rather than comparing is the place to start for me. And then normally from there, I'm able to kind of figure it out, Whatever mood that kind of comparison has put me in, or whatever, I guess, joy it has taken from me, being thankful and appreciating the things that I have now and knowing that I didn't always have those things has been what's really helped me. But what about you?
I mean, I guess I would say more so of kind of along the lines of confidence, right? So to not have the need to compare yourself to others, I try and avoid it, and I tend to feel bad when I do it, right? So if I look at someone and I'm like, oh, this person, but I really don't even do this. Like, say if somebody's like beneath you, like I don't like looking at anybody beneath me. I like to look at everybody as we're all the same, no matter what it is, right? I have a hard time with, because I look at that as disrespect. I'm someone who's big on respect. So ever since I was a little kid, I always thought I should get respect. I don't care if I'm 10 years old and you're 50, you should respect me just as much as I'm respecting you. I always thought it shouldn't be about, age or how the person is, who the person is. I look at it in the aspect of respect, right? It's something that I feel like we should give everyone, not that everyone deserves it, but I was big on respect. So, I even remember when I was little, if an adult would get mad at me for something, unwarranted, or even sometimes if it was warranted, I would speak up for myself, right? If they were talking to me disrespectfully, I wasn't going to let that fly. Like, whether I was right or wrong is one thing, but I was just always big on respect. So I guess self-comparing, I like to kind of look at them almost one and the same, self-comparing and respect, because yes, I'm guilty of comparing myself to other people, but I also look for respect, right? So I'm going to be, my first, I guess, instinct is to respect someone. And then once they disrespect me, I guess that's when I start doing that negative comparison. I guess that would be my answer to that.
Okay.
It's not that it's a good thing, but I guess that's kind of my thing.
So when you notice yourself comparing, you go back to the idea of I need to respect this person the same way that I hope to be respected by them.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
But how would that, if you don't mind me asking, how would that tie into the confidence aspect of it?
Confidence for me is respect to myself. So by respecting myself, I give myself that confidence and saying like, look, I'm comfortable with who I am. I respect my values. I respect who I am as a person. And that kind of takes me that distance and gets me to that confidence, I guess. For me, it all kind of ties together. Whether it makes sense or not, I'm not sure. But
no, it does.
Maybe they're not all the same thing. Obviously, they're not the same thing, but I kind of like to tie all of them together. I feel like confidence brings you to not have to compare yourself to others. And then that respect kind of just staples that in, and makes it kind of concrete.
Yeah. Can I add something else to that?
Yeah.
So I think a big part of that also, and like where that confidence will come from, is being honest with who you are and not trying to be someone that you're not. Because when you really are yourself, there's no second thoughts about, am I doing the right thing, or am I, like, should I be doing this, or am I doing this wrong, or should I be wearing this a certain, you know what I mean? Like, doing things according to the way other people are doing them, rather than just doing them the way that you want to. And that, to me, creates comfort in my own skin, which then kind of gives me that confidence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. A good example for this, to not compare yourself to others, is think about like a science experiment, right? You have two different objects, right? And normally they're identical, and you're going to be given a variable to change that thing, right? Humans are two things that are, I guess, technically identical, right? We're all human in that aspect. We're the same, but the amount of variables that we have it's unfathomable, right? We can't even count it.
Yeah, it's almost like unlimited.
Exactly. So why are we comparing ourselves to something we're not? Or like you said, like
that
trying
we know
to
nothing
be
about.
Yeah, trying to be something we can't be. And that's something that really kind of struck me hard, right? It's like, that is true. We are, all different in so many different ways, right? But that doesn't mean, you can't bring other people up, and you can't strive to be a better you. That doesn't mean any of those things. But it's the thought of trying to compare yourself to someone else, right? That's not necessary to better yourself, or, like, for people who do things for the reasons like, oh, I want to have money because I want to have more money than this person. Like, it's not fueled by the right place, right? Like, that's
No.
not the right thought. Instead of being like, no, I want to have money because I want to support my family and give them a life that, I didn't have, or whatever it is. It's like the reasons behind, I guess, the ideas is sometimes an issue.
Yeah.
Would you say your comparisons are, I guess, negatively affecting you, or have you kind of worked on that to prevent yourself from doing that?
I don't think it ever really stops, because when you really think about it, there's always someone technically above or beneath you, right? If that's the way you want to phrase it, but I don't think it ever really stops. I just think that you get better at dealing with it, and you gain more perspective along the way, and it just becomes something that you do less. Because with everybody, there's something that they're not completely comfortable with about themselves, and that changes throughout time. You may grow to be more comfortable in a certain part of yourself, but then there's a different part of yourself that might have lacked during that time that you may now not be super comfortable with, and you kind of compare to other people. So I don't think it ever really stops, but personally, I think that finding, like how you said, confidence and respect is your way of going about, I guess, defying those feelings, and thankfulness is what's worked really well for me. I think you kind of just have to sit in those thoughts and those feelings and really try to figure out where they come from, and then you can kind of deal with it from there, because it's not going to be the same for everybody, and the way that it makes sense to you is not going to be the same exact way it makes sense to me, and it may be completely different for the guy next door, And I think that's where you need to have a little bit more of that individual approach, is that, okay, this worked for this person, but that might not work for you, right? Or this person has these things. That might not be your life. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what they value and all those things. And I think just having perspective will give you a place to look to start to figure out why you're comparing.
Yeah, I like that. And before we get into kind of ways to stop this self-comparing, like some tips and whatnot, I also just want to say, like I said, like, I'm someone who's guilty of it too, right? I look at people where I'm like, oh, like, I want that, but not that I'm comparing myself in the positive way, because those, I set goals, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I could achieve this, I could do that, and I want to kind of better myself. I want to get myself to a better point. So in that aspect, I think it's good. But then, like you said, there's times where I'll put other people down, and I'm guilty of it, and it's not good. And you don't feel good after doing it. It doesn't make you feel better, and I think that's a common misconception. I think a lot of people to themselves think, hey, if I'm going to put someone down, it's going to make me feel better. It's like a bully when you're in middle school. Like, that bully's not making himself feel good by putting other kids down. It's like, it's kind of the same thing when you're an adult. Not that other people are going to know you're doing it. It could be all internal. When you're doing it internally, and I don't want to speak for everyone because I don't know what's going on in your own head, but for me, it's like, I feel bad after. I feel guilty. Yeah. I'm like, why am I doing that? It's like, there's no purpose for that, right? I'm not helping anyone. It's not helping me, so it's like, why would I do that? It's definitely something that I think a lot about, right? I've grown up in a family that is very judgmental, right? Like, so ever since I was a kid, I've always heard people comparing, not really my immediate family, I guess more like extended family. Growing up, like, no matter what people did, it was like, oh, why are they doing that? Why are they doing this? We do this, they do that, and it's like, you're comparing, and it's like, for what? And then growing up, I was super self-conscious about things. I was like, are these people thinking this about me? And that's really where my social anxiety stems from. I remember, like, walking around places, and somebody would look at me for a second, and I'd get all angry. I'd be like, why are they looking at me? Like, what do they want?
Yeah, when we were like 13 or 14, right?
Yeah.
Try to pick a fight with everybody.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, yeah, they want to judge me? They want to look? And Like, they could have just been, like, looking at me, not even realizing, and thinking about their dog. Like, I have no clue what they're thinking about, but my first thought immediately is, like, to be defensive. You know, I'm like, what are they doing? Why are they looking at me?
So, question, do you think that comes from, I guess, like, gossip and drama? Because all that really is comparing and talking trash on comparisons, right? Putting people down, right? It's that downward social comparison that you were talking about, essentially, is what gossip and drama is, right? So, not that you necessarily participated in it, but would the knowledge of, like, knowing that stuff happens, is that where that comparison for you kind of comes from a little bit?
Like, what do you mean? Like, is that why I compare myself to other people? Or
not 100% why, because I don't think there's ever really one exact reason.
Yeah, because I think it's in us.
Yeah. Say in school, right? People talked about each other, about people who weren't in the same class, you know, something that happened over the weekend, you know, to kids in their grades, kids they were friends with, whatever, right? Essentially, that's social comparison, whether it was upward, downward, whatever direction it was. Does participating in that or just hearing it happen have an effect on you, and did that lead you to compare yourself more?
Yes and no. I think when I was younger, like in middle school more, yeah, it would make me kind of be like, oh, I don't want to be the one they're talking about, you know, so let's throw somebody else's name in there. You know, and then as I got older, I kind of avoided those situations. I was just like, you know, what are we doing? We're in high school and we're really going to be gossiping about people. Like, I kind of just didn't surround myself with that because I was like, I don't need to be around that. You know, like my town that I live in, super small, right? So I went to middle school with like 200 kids maybe, something like that.
In the grade or the school?
In the grade. In my grade. Or maybe 150. No, it was small. Our town's small. Like, for us, it was small. And then going to Kellenberg, you know, like Kellenberg, it was 600 kids in our grade or 500 kids. Like, big difference. My town is so small. Everybody knows each other's business. Everybody talks about each other. And we all hated that. Like, my family. You know, we were always like, for what? You know, like, we didn't like that. So, in middle school, that's all we knew. Because that's what everybody did, right? So, it's like, all these kids were doing it, too. Because that's what everybody's parents did. And then once I got to high school, I was like, I left for that reason. I was like, why is this still happening? And, you know, I surrounded myself with people who didn't really do that. And then, you know, it's like, you don't want to leave the room and be worried somebody's, you know, one of your friends is talking bad about you because, you know, it's not your friend.
Yeah. So follow up to that. Even though you weren't participating in it, you knew it was happening.
Yeah.
Right? So did the thought of knowing it was happening have an effect on you? And does it still have a little bit of I wouldn't say an effect, but it's something that you think about sometimes?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, those people who are doing that are insecure people, right? They want to turn the attention off of them. They want to have somebody else the center of focus, whatever it is. If they've got something going on, they'd rather make fun of somebody else, and it temporarily makes them feel better, you know? And I've always been that person where if I've noticed somebody doing that, I was that kid to kind of stick up for everybody else, right? So, look, if it's between two people and it's not my business, I won't say anything. But when there's somebody who's quote-unquote higher up and then they're picking on somebody below them, that irks the shit out of me. Like, there's nothing that bothers me more than that. So it's like I make sure I always kind of stick up for those kids and make sure they're not comparing and making sure they're not like, oh yeah, look at him, like acting like they're so much better. You know, it's like that makes you so much worse because you're doing that and they don't even realize that. But yeah, it definitely had an effect on me because I don't like anybody being put down, right? Even if I'm in an argument with somebody, I don't want other people to kind of jump in on that because that's between me and that person. Like, you don't need to make that person feel even worse. Like, if they're wrong at something, I've got it covered. Like, I'll handle that. You know, you don't need to jump in. And then it's like, then I want to go and defend them because why is everybody else jumping in and ganging up on them? You know, so it's like, yeah, it definitely had an effect on me. And I would say I probably avoided things because of it in some aspects, you know, but it's probably more just my social anxiety. it all, like I said, kind of stems from that, is that comparing people. It's like, because like I said, since I was little, it's always been kind of about that, right? So, if that's all you think is normal, you're gonna take that with you. How about you? Is there any situations like that you've experienced? Or
You mean like in terms of like the drama and the gossip and all that stuff, like how that had an effect
how
on you?
did that affect you?
Whether or not I actually knew, or it was just maybe me thinking that people were talking. I wouldn't say necessarily it affected me negatively, but I definitely changed my behavior because of it at certain points. Can I give you a specific instance? No,
Yeah.
I can't remember
Okay.
those small little moments. I don't think they necessarily happen in like these big dramatic moments all the time, but I definitely do remember feeling that.
Yeah. So now I want to get into ways to stop self-comparing, and if any of these are things that resonate with you, you could just, jump in and say why. The first thing is to be aware of your triggers and avoid them, right? So I think that's kind of, simple, right? If you're going to the mall and one of your friends wants to go to an expensive store, but you can't afford that, like, of course that's going to make you feel worse about yourself, and then most likely people are going to be like, oh, well, she could get this or he could get that and I can't. Like, you're going to kind of do that comparison. Obviously, you're already in that situation, but in the future, once you're aware that that situation makes you uncomfortable or makes you feel a certain way, in the future, avoid that, right? So take the action to kind of avoid that. Or be happy for that person that they can afford it, right? Kind of change your mindset and stop making everything about you, because it's not about you, right? If that person wants to go buy something, it's about them, not about you, okay? Second thing, limit your time on social media. I think that's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a terrible place. We did an episode on social media, so I don't want to spend too much time on that.
Yeah, I will say, even though just yesterday, like I didn't do really much of anything yesterday because I was so tired, I watched a lot of TV. I was on my phone a lot during the day, and I felt awful before I went to bed. Like, absolutely awful. And, sure, it was nice to kind of hang out and do nothing, but it was a very quick reminder on how important it is to really you can't really get sucked into social media and stuff like that too much. It really does take a negative effect.
Yeah,
on your
definitely.
mental health.
And that's good of you to kind of acknowledge that, because it is tough, right? You're seeing all these models, these influencers, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
a lot of
Even if
people
it's
compare.
just friends who
Yeah.
you feel like are doing better than, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's a place that kind of sucks you in, like you said, and it's easy to get trapped in that. The next thing is avoid comparing other people's outsides to your own insides, right? So no one truly knows what's happening behind the scenes in someone's life. Everyone is facing their own struggles. So stop looking at people's outsides life, what they're showing you on the outside, and comparing it to yours, right? Yes, people may be posting stuff, oh yeah, I'm here, or saying stuff, and you really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So stop wishing you were somebody, be you and be the best you. Be grateful for what you have, what you've accomplished, and your friends, and everything. Instead of, like I said, kind of change your mindset. Instead of looking at it in that negative way, you can easily look at it in a positive way, right? My friend's doing great. I'm so happy for him. Or this person's able to go do this. Great for them, or, even like we're doing that thing next month. We're entering in a competition and, for Dark Angel. And, I could have just been like, oh yeah, I don't want him a part of this or whatever it is. But no, like, you could get victories together. Like, that's great.
That's the whole point of it, though, is like you want to be able to share those things.
Yeah, exactly. Or even like people could look at what I'm doing as like, oh, well, yeah, what he's doing is great, but he could be doing this. Why isn't he doing this? Like, no,
It's what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's what makes you happy.
Exactly. Like, stop being so negative and stop caring what people do. Worry about yourself.
Yeah.
The next thing is focus on your strengths, right? Not your weaknesses. So yet again, kind of reframing your mindset. Remind yourself every day what you're great at, not what you can't do. This will motivate you to try new things and maybe even harder things, right? So things you may not have been capable of, but that confidence and that perseverance, you will, and it's not what about somebody else can do and you can't do. Focus on what you can do and better yourself by doing that, right? The next thing is to celebrate other people's wins, right? The amount of times that, I've come to you and you've come to me and, we've said like, hey, like I've done this, and it's like, we're so supportive of each other and so happy when we have a win. It's like, and I'm going to speak for you because I already know this is true. There's not 1 ounce of me where when he does something successful, I'm like, damn it, like, I wish it didn't go well. Like, every part of me is like, yes, like, good for you. That's amazing. And it's like, and I know you're the same way because we care about each other, right? We care. And what good would it do for us if you're not doing well? Like, that's not good for me. Like, I'd rather you do well and see you succeed, even if you do better than me. Exactly. Like, my friend who's in business, he's doing very well. There's not parts of me that I'm like, oh, I wish he fails. Like, I want him to do bad. Like, no, I'm like, he's killing it.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. Good for him, right? Like, I'm happy for him because he is doing great. It has nothing to do with me, Yeah. Nothing to do with me. I don't understand, where it comes from when people want people to do bad, right? Especially people they're close to, right?
Yeah.
And I see that a lot. I don't understand it, and maybe you do, but wherever that comes from, for those of you who are listening, if that is something you deal with, I'd love to know why, right? I would love to know the reasoning why. I can take a guess, it's probably jealousy.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And it's most likely that you really don't care about the person, when it comes down to it. At least that's how I look at it.
And a little bit of selfishness, too.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. The next thing is instead of comparing yourself to others, compare your past self to now.
I was going to add that in if you're not going to say it.
Yeah. So I think that's huge, right? Like, it's very easy to compare yourself to someone else and be like, oh, I'm not there. Why can't I be there? But instead, look at yourself and say, look at where I was a year ago and look at where I am now. And if you're in a worse place than you were, use that as some motivation to say, look, I want to better myself twice as good as I was this last year, and it kind of keeps you in line and it keeps you only worrying about yourself and comparing yourself to you. You don't have to worry about other people and compare yourself to other people because at the end of the day, it's only between you and you, that's really it.
And can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
So I think a lot of times with the comparison, it comes with material things, right? And in terms of looking back, right, at where you were and where you are now, if it's something that you almost like take for granted, right? Or it's something that you never really had to go without, and you're comparing that to other people's, like their end spoils or whatever they've done that they've accomplished their big goal, right? And you're comparing what you have and you're saying, oh, well, it's nothing compared to this, right? Take that thing away from yourself. Really appreciate, how much easier it makes your life or, like how well or how hard you had to work to get there. Easier to appreciate something when you don't have it.
Yes.
Right? So if you're struggling to appreciate what you have, make your life a little bit more difficult for a couple days.
Yeah, exactly. Challenge yourself.
Yeah.
And look, like we've always said too, whether we've said it on here or not, I don't know, but the journey is what's so important, right? So instead of jumping to the end and, one day being unsuccessful and then the next day being successful, it doesn't work like that, right?
There's no gratification there either.
No.
There's no long-term happiness.
Exactly. The excitement and the joy comes from the journey. You're not going to look back at, like, your failures, your successes, your in-betweens, they define you.
They're your stories,
Exactly. So it's like, if you want to skip that and you want to compare and you want to immediately get to somewhere where you're not, take the steps to get there and appreciate that journey, right? What are some other ways you compare yourself to others and how have you stopped if you have stopped?
I'd say, like, the money was probably the biggest thing.
Okay.
Because I recently moved out a little over a year ago. Now I'm back. So it's that, okay, I will say that definitely took a huge hit because at least my ego took a huge hit. Because, you go from moving out, and I was one of my first friends that I knew to move out, and then, I was like, oh, I'm never moving back home, yada, yada, yada. And little do you know, a year later, I'm back home, And it definitely has taken me some time to appreciate that again. And appreciate, not that I didn't appreciate my family and I didn't appreciate those things, but it taught me to kind of appreciate, I guess, like you said, the journey a little bit more. Because then you look around to all these kids who are able to move out and stay moved out, At young ages, it doesn't necessarily have to be, the exact same situation. It could be a little different. And I have found myself comparing to that. And it definitely took away a little bit of joy for me when I first moved back and for a couple months after. So I never, honestly, until now, I don't think I've ever really kind of put it together like this. But it has helped to be able to kind of put in perspective, okay, I'm back home. But in that year, all those things that I learned over that year and a half time, I feel like 2 or 3, 4 years have passed, and I might not have learned those things in any of those other situations. So yeah, I moved back home, but I got to do all these things and learn all these things and experience all these things that most people don't at that age. That is what I've become appreciative for, but that took me a long time to find.
Yeah. And I would say for myself is kind of with this, right? Like I look at other people and I would say, oh, wow, look at what they've done. Why can't I do that, right? Or when people blow up and I'm like, why can't I do that? And it's like, that's definitely something I compare myself for the most, or, why haven't I gotten that much success? And then I remind myself, it's about the journey, and I always tell myself that because there's no point of rushing it. This is the best part. We're going to look back at this and we're going to be like, damn, like look at us 10 years ago and look at what we were doing, and it's like 10 years later, you're going to be like, look at where I am now, and I have full confidence that we are going to be, in a great place in 5, 10 years, whatever it is, that feeling of, bringing each other up. And I think that's something that's really important. The sooner you start lifting people up instead of putting people down, you're going to notice a difference.
And people start to lift you up in return.
Yes, totally.
It really is. Like what you put out there, you kind of get.
Yeah, and like we surround each other with that energy, and there's nothing else, right? There's never ever any other type of energy, right? We're never...
And it's a good feeling.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Feel good.
Yeah, you can come to each other in confidence and say, look, man, like, you're never going to get put down.
Yeah.
And look, if we're in the wrong, it's not like you're always going to be told you're right, but you're going to have that confidence and that knowing that somebody's got your back.
That freedom in that relationship or that space to kind of be who you are and not really think about it.
Yeah, exactly. You have anything else to add? No? Thank you guys again, and thank you for all the support. You guys are seriously awesome. I really appreciate everything. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Thank you guys so much for listening, and don't forget to check out Dark Angel Company on Instagram at DarkAngelCo and online at darkangelco.com. If you're interested in supporting and spreading awareness towards bringing light to a dark topic together, then tune in next time.